The myth of Icarus is one of the most famous cautionary tales in human history. With wings made of feathers and wax, crafted by his ingenious father Daedalus, Icarus soared into the sky. Yet, instead of obeying his father's warning to keep to the middle path, he flew too close to the sun. His wings melted, and the boy plunged helplessly into the sea. Generations of poets, artists, and philosophers used this image as a timeless lesson. Ambition unchecked will lead to ruin. But what if the story had ended differently? What if the wings had held? Or if Icarus had tempered his joy with wisdom? What if, rather than falling, he had completed his flight? This single twist might have rewritten not just one story, but the way humanity has thought about ambition, invention, and destiny for millennia. Imagine a world where Icarus did not drown beneath the waves, but instead soared across the horizon, safe and triumphant. He would no longer symbolize recklessness. Instead, he would become the youth who combined daring with discipline. The Greeks would honor him as the mortal who proved that humankind could touch the heavens without being destroyed. His name would no longer be whispered as a warning in tragedies, but celebrated in hymns, epic poetry, and sculpture. Children would be taught not that ambition kills, but that ambition guided by wisdom can elevate humanity beyond the earth. The fall of Icarus has long been a shadow over dreamers, but in this alternate history, his survival would illuminate them. The myth would transform from a tale of limits into a testament of possibility, and the figure of Icarus himself would stand not among the fallen, but among the heroes. If Icarus survived, his father Daedalus would be remembered differently as well. In our version of the myth, his grief overshadows his brilliance, making his greatest invention the cause of his son's death. In the alternate telling, Daedalus would be honored as the pioneer of human flight, the master craftsman whose designs allowed not only survival but victory. His workshop would be mythologized not as a place of sorrow, but as the birthplace of a new art, aviation. Apprentices might flock to him, hoping to learn his secrets. Instead of being known only as the builder of the labyrinth, Daedalus would become a symbol of creative genius rewarded rather than punished. The father and son together would represent invention and ambition in harmony, a living myth that science and courage can combine to expand the human horizon. Greek mythology is full of mortals who are punished for defying divine limits. Prometheus was chained for stealing fire. Niobe was turned to stone for her pride. Icarus's fall fit this pattern perfectly, but if he lived, how would the gods react? Zeus, who ruled the skies, might see human flight as a challenge to his authority. Athena, goddess of wisdom, might admire the boy for proving that restraint can guide daring. Perhaps new myths would arise, a divine council debating whether to encourage or punish humanity's ascent. In this version, the gods would no longer be automatic enemies of human ambition. Instead, they might become patrons or rivals, setting the stage for an entire mythology of mankind learning to share the heavens with the immortals. Icarus's survival would not simply rewrite one tale, it could alter the whole balance between mortals and gods. The Greek world valued moderation. The concept of hubris, dangerous arrogance, was central to its ethics. The fall of Icarus served as proof of that principle. But a surviving Icarus would shift the meaning entirely. Ambition itself would not be condemned. Only careless ambition would. Socrates might have used Icarus as an example of the examined life, courage tempered with knowledge of limits. Aristotle could have pointed to him as the perfect embodiment of the golden mean, soaring high but not too high, low but not too low. Plato might have included him as a symbol of the soul's ascent toward truth. Instead of warning citizens to restrain themselves, philosophers might encourage them to dream boldly, so long as they mastered themselves first. Greek philosophy would gain a new archetype, the wise dreamer who flies without falling. Art, literature, and civic life would all be transformed by a triumphant Icarus. Tragedians like Euripides might write plays celebrating his successful escape, praising the courage of mortals who dared to rival the skies. Sculptors could immortalize him in marble, wings stretched wide in victory. Temples might be decorated with frescoes of Icarus not falling into the sea, but flying toward the horizon. His image could even appear on coins, shields, and public monuments as a civic emblem of ambition and progress. Athens, always proud of its innovation, might adopt Icarus as a cultural mascot. Civic leaders could use his story to encourage boldness in politics, science, and art. Instead of a symbol of failure, Icarus would be the torchbearer of aspiration, teaching that risk and vision are the engines of greatness. Practical flight would not become widespread immediately, of course, but belief in possibility is often the first step toward reality. Once Icarus's survival proved human flight was achievable, inventors across Greece might have tried to replicate and improve upon Daedalus's designs. Stronger glues, sturdier frames, or early attempts at gliders might appear. The same culture that produced water clocks, cranes, and catapults could begin rudimentary studies of aerodynamics. These efforts would be primitive, but they would plant seeds. In a world inspired by Icarus's success, humanity might chase the dream of aviation not in the 15th or 19th centuries, but in the 3rd century BCE. The sky would no longer be myth's domain alone. It would become a frontier for engineers. If even primitive gliders were developed, their military uses would be inevitable. Scouts could soar briefly above battlefields. Messengers could carry news across valleys. Symbolic aerial displays might terrify enemies or inspire troops. When Rome conquered Greece, it could inherit these ideas. Imagine legions accompanied not only by cavalry but by airborne scouts. Though limited, such technologies could alter strategy and morale. Empires thrive on symbols as much as on weapons. A Rome that paraded Icarus as an ancestor of its legions might see itself as destined not only to rule land and sea, but sky as well. The political imagination of empire would stretch earlier and farther than in our history. Greek scientists were already close to breakthroughs. Archimedes studied buoyancy, levers, and pulleys. Hero of Alexandria created early steam devices. If the dream of flight had been respected and pursued, perhaps Archimedes would have examined the forces of air, or Hero's steam engine would have been refined into something more than a toy. The Hellenistic world was rich in scholarship. An Icarian culture might push inventors to look not just downward at water or outward at machines, but upward at the very air itself. Aerodynamics, propulsion, and energy could have entered human studies centuries before Leonardo da Vinci sketched his flying machines. Flight might become the mother of modern science, not its distant cousin. History tells us the Renaissance bloomed in the 15th century, when Europe rediscovered Greek and Roman texts and embraced curiosity. But in a world where Icarus triumphed, a kind of early Renaissance might ignite in the Hellenistic age itself. The Greeks and their successors would treat science not only as philosophy, but as destiny. Alexandria, with its vast library, could become the hub of aviation studies. Rome, instead of stagnating in engineering, might push toward innovation in energy and materials. 1,000 years of darkness in Europe might be shortened, as ambition was never stigmatized but glorified. Humanity could leap forward centuries ahead of schedule. Exploration across seas and lands might also change. The Phoenicians were skilled sailors. Emboldened by a cultural myth that celebrated ambition rather than punished it, they might have ventured further into the Atlantic, perhaps even reaching new continents before Columbus. Later, during the Middle Ages, exploration might never have slowed if Icarus's story had sanctified the idea of daring beyond the known. The age of discovery could arrive not in the 15th century but in antiquity. Humanity's borders would expand much earlier, all because one boy's wings held together. In our own history, the ultimate echo of Icarus was the space race. Astronauts are often compared to him, risking everything to reach the heavens. But if Icarus had succeeded, space exploration might not be a metaphor of defiance, but of fulfillment. Kepler, Galileo, and Copernicus might have been funded more generously. Telescopes might be invented earlier, rockets conceived sooner, and spaceflight attempted centuries before the 20th century. Humanity might already be interplanetary by now. The stars would not be reminders of limits, but promises of destiny, written first by Icarus's unbroken wings. Carl Jung described myths as archetypes shaping the collective unconscious. In our world, Icarus is the archetype of the reckless dreamer, punished for overreaching. In the alternate myth, he would embody the archetype of the wise dreamer, ambitious, daring, but also disciplined. Dreamers across history would carry not the guilt of being too much like Icarus, but the pride of it. Inventors might claim him as their spiritual ancestor, pointing not to his fall but to his triumph. This shift in cultural psychology could produce a society more willing to reward risk-takers, more forgiving of ambition, and more determined to reach beyond the ordinary. But what would be lost without the warning? Cautionary tales protect societies. They remind people that limits exist. Without Icarus's fall, humanity might overreach more often, leading to earlier disasters, unstable inventions, reckless wars, or collapsed empires. Hubris would not disappear. It would only find other outlets. Perhaps Phaethon, who drove the chariot of the sun and died, would become the central warning myth instead. Still, the balance between ambition and restraint might tilt dangerously. We might advance faster, but also burn ourselves more quickly. The cost of survival is that the warning disappears. So what if Icarus never fell? Perhaps humanity would have flown centuries earlier, explored oceans before maps existed, or even walked among the stars already. Or perhaps we would have destroyed ourselves through unchecked ambition. The truth lies not in choosing one outcome, but in recognizing the tension between them. Whether Icarus falls or flies, the myth teaches that ambition and caution must dance together. Courage without wisdom is ruin, but wisdom without courage is stagnation. In the end, the question is not only about Icarus, it is about us. Will we soar boldly, and will we be wise enough to keep our wings intact? Between earth and sky, that balance is the eternal human flight.